Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have full review of the iPad Pro with Apple's M4 chip. Let's get started. This is the newest iPad Pro and it's obviously going to be very expensive. It is offered in two sizes, 11 and 13 inches. And in turn, within these options, there are two additional options. One with traditional glass and one with nano textured glass, which keeps you from more reflections. And in turn, there are more storage divisions with 256, 512 or 1 terabyte. So as you will notice, the price can be very variable depending on the option you choose. But the most basic configuration is the 11 inches with 256 gigabytes of storage and standard glass at a price of 24,999 pesos in Mexico. This with taxes included and would be approximately $1,225 to give you an idea. But remember that prices here are not the same as there. In my case, I will be testing the edition of 13 inches with standard glass 2 gigabytes of storage. But just to give you an idea, the most expensive edition is 2 terabytes of storage with 13 inches and nano textured glass, and that edition is priced at 57,499 pesos including taxes, which would be more or less $2,815. But well, with all this variety and price ranges, this iPad is definitely also competing in a price category where it competes against computers, which causes the feeling to be somewhat strange. Although I agree that it is another category of product, but the purpose could become very similar in its use. And in fact, I forgot to tell you that there is still another option that if you wanted to have mobile data and internet connection, it increases you still another 5,000 pesos, and consider that the Apple Pencil is sold separately and also this keyboard that I have in my hands is sold separately, so it is an expensive device that should fit you, very clear from the beginning. Like any Apple product does not seek to compete on price or anything like that. So let's get to know it little by little for you to decide if it is something worth buying for you or not. Let's start with the design, since in this case we find something traditional from Apple, but without a doubt it is perceived as something premium. The entire structure is made of aluminum, both the frame and the back, so it gives a very good feeling in the hand. At the front we will find bezels that are not so reduced, but this is not necessarily bad because it has enough space to hold the tablet and that the thumb does not get to give unwanted touches inside the screen. So it seems to me that the design is correct, although in this case does not have water resistance, which if we could demand. Considering that Samsung, if you integrate this level of resistance in the Galaxy Tab S Ultra and even from previous models as well, that Apple is a bit behind in this aspect still, and in such an expensive device, we can definitely demand it. By the way, here at the front we are going to find a glass that prevents reflections in a very good way, even from this option that is not nano-textured. In the nano-textured option, we are going to notice that the reflections are completely cancelled out and you would only see a kind of glare, very similar to what we see in Huawei's paper matte finish. Although, I must tell you that this one, the screen gets very smudged with your fingers, so you have to be constantly cleaning it, and that's not so nice. Holding the iPad horizontally, on the right side we will find two audio grills and the USB-C port. On the left side we will find the on and off button plus two grills for the speakers. A microphone on the top. We have an area to place the Apple Pencil with magnetic absorption. There is also a microphone and the buttons of the volume control, which by the way work as they should. The right button increases the volume, the left button lowers the volume, unlike all Android tablets that have this reversed. So even in these little details you can see that Apple takes great care in its development. At the bottom there is absolutely nothing, and is that the pins are placed on the back. These pins are going to connect to your different accessories like the keyboard that I showed you that we will talk about in a moment. But I find it curious that the iPad is a little more thought to use it in landscape format, but all the text distribution and the logo is oriented vertically. I think it would be an interesting change to see the rotation. Especially because in the keyboard accessory, if we see the Apple placed horizontally. Anyway, near the camera you will find a strip in plastic to help the connectivity of the antennas, and in this case, I have the silver edition, but it is also available in space black color. In this case, there is not as much variety as we would see in cheaper iPad models, but I don't think you need more options. This 13-inch edition has a thickness of 5.1 mm. although the smaller edition is a bit thicker at 5.3 millimeters, and the weight for this edition without cellular connectivity is 179 grams. The smaller edition has a weight of 444 grams overall. Let's say that it is quite comfortable to carry, although if you are going to use it with the keyboard, the weight is increased. In fact, it is curious that the keyboard weighs even more than the iPad weighs, being 662 grams its weight. So if you add the weight of both, gives you more than 1.2 kilograms, which exceeds the weight of some of the most advanced computers we see. So if you're thinking of using it as an alternative to a computer, it doesn't really compete very well in this regard, but let me tell you a little bit more about the details of this keyboard in case you want to consider it. Because its price is 7,999 pesos. With taxes included on the screen, you see the reference price in dollars. It must be said that the hinge of this keyboard is very good, it shows a very good rigidity, and also its design looks quite premium because it leaves the iPad practically floating, so it looks very advanced. And by the way, you can also adjust the inclination of this screen, not at the same level of a laptop, but with sufficient angles for comfortable use. Also, the feel to the touch is going to be very similar to what we would see on a Mac. Maybe that's also why the weight becomes a rival. Also, the keyboard adds special function keys at the top. You will also notice a small lady on the Shift key, and you will notice the special keys like Control, Option, or Command. Plus a trackpad area that is about 5 inches in size. It makes very good use of the space, and the keys have excellent travel. So it's definitely a very good quality keyboard that adds very good value to the iPad, but it also adds a lot of weight and a lot of price. By the way, this keyboard is even backlit, so I insist that it gives you a pretty premium experience with the price to pay that I already told you. Also, a point that seems to me exaggeratedly positive about this accessory is that it adds a USB-C port right in the hinge area, and this does give you much greater flexibility compared to other tablets, and of course, it's a great value. In some way, if you could get closer to the experience that give you ultra-compact laptops that at least have 2 USB ports. So you add the port that brings integrated the iPad with the port of this keyboard, and in both cases we are talking about Thunderbolt. So they offer very fast connectivity, and you can even connect an external monitor with a resolution of up to 4K. Then you have very good things in terms of connectivity through this port. And finally, with regard to wireless connectivity, it has Wi-Fi 6E very good speed and Bluetooth 5.3. Let's go now to talk about the screen that in this configuration is 13 inches. Although remember that I told you that it is also available in a smaller size of 11 inches. But in both cases we see tandem OLED technology, which means that the OLED screen has 2 layers, therefore has greater brightness. Although in this case, the brightness expressed as maximum peak is 1600 nits when you're watching HDR content. But here the interesting thing is that in SDR, that is, without showing any HDR content, it peaks at 1000 nits, so it's a really very bright screen. In both size options, it reaches a density of 264 pixels per inch, so the definition is going to be very good for the distance from which we usually watch tablets. This density is very good. You are not going to distinguish the pixels, plus its refresh rate is 120 Hz with the promotion technology. I would use more this type of Apple that varies from 10 to 120, then it is also efficient because in static content you will notice that it does not consume as much battery and also has true tone to adapt the white color to the white color of the environment, and as I said, there is the option of nano-textured glass. Overall, it is a really very good screen. Its proportion is 2.6 to 2 to put it in some way, i.e. it is a rectangular screen but not as wide as most tablets, so let's say that. In multimedia consumption, it will give you the inconvenience of showing you black stripes above and below quite high, but I think it's a good sacrifice to pay in order to have much better distributed space when working. Even if you want to work with split screen or with applications that show several options at the top or bottom, you still have very good space. So personally, I do not dislike this ratio. Although I am a person who would use more this type. I have no doubt that this is one of its main strengths that comes to complement well the experience when watching multimedia content. The truth of the matter is that it is a screen with excellent quality, excellent brightness, compatible with HDR, and there is not much to reproach it. Now let's talk a little bit about the audio, because it integrates 4 speakers and the quality is supreme in this sense. both in terms of the audio and the sound quality. In screen and speaker, I think they can outperform computers in similar price ranges, but specifically in sound, it surpasses them by a lot. It is a very loud sound with very good power in the low frequencies. Generally, in computers, you will find much simpler speakers. So I have no doubt that this is one of its main strengths that comes to complement well the experience when viewing multimedia content. While the screen may show a lot of black space, if you want to watch movies or videos with these speakers, you will enjoy it a lot. But let's listen to a small test. Although remember that it is not the same as listening to it live.
I'm just an accident with you.
It's worth remembering that it doesn't have a headphone jack, so it comes with a very targeted approach to wireless headphones, which doesn't quite convince me because being a device that could be a good working tool, if you want to use it, for example, for video editing, you're going to have some latency that's not so comfortable. However, for listening to music, I think you will not perceive any loss in quality compared to headphones, since it does support its own codec. The Apple microphone offers you lossless sound, although you need to have Apple or Beats headphones that support this codec because it does not support LDAC or LHDC, which are codecs used by other manufacturers for their high-resolution audio headphones. So even if you buy very sophisticated headphones, they are not going to give you high-resolution audio unless they are Apple headphones. And even though it does have Dolby Atmos support, it doesn't give you a system-wide equalizer, which I would love. But you only have equalizer available for Apple Music or whatever equalizer any other app gives you. But it's not system-wide. So in this sense, definitely that the experience could be improved and we should demand it. Regarding the microphones, we will find 4 spread around the iPad. Apple claims they are studio quality. Let's listen to a test. This is audio captured with the iPad Pro microphones at a traditional distance without any processing. Definitely that the microphones are of very good quality. In this sense, there is nothing to reproach. You could even use them for home recordings. If you like to produce music and want to have something to quickly save your idea, you can definitely do it. And for video calls, you know that Apple also offers you some noise cancellation modes or give emphasis to the voice, so it includes everything you need. The front camera is 12 megapixels and has f2.0 aperture plus fixed focus. Supposedly it is a wide camera, but curiously, in the camera application you will find a smaller setting. However, for video calls, if you will find a wider setting that also allows you to have automatic framing if you move, it's a very video call focused camera, which I think is a good thing. Of course, I would like it to have support for 4K recording, because in this case it is only Full HD. Although for video calls it is sufficient and necessary, but for the price of the device, I think we could ask for 4K recording. In this case, this would be the quality being in front of a window, although it is a cloudy day, so it is not such a high illumination. And as you can see, it does show a bit of grain, so it's not an image of exaggerated quality, it's just enough to have a good video call. Notice, for example, that in a much darker scene, and even with a bit of backlight, it will show even more grain and less contrast. So the image quality is simple for video calls only, and your video call is not going to look as professional. In fact, note that this would be the full width of the camera, and in this width you do not notice so much grainy or so much noise, although curiously by default Apple gives preference to a much closer framing of your face. But I insist, if you use the camera with the full width, I think the image quality improves because it does not look so cropped. For the back, we find a 28mm camera, that is to say it has a slightly closer fit than I would like. I think it would be. Better a slightly wider camera to get a better perspective, considering that a tablet, normally you're not going to use it too much on things far away, but maybe for documents and the like. Video recording quality can go up to 4K at 60 frames per second, and the sensor is 12 megapixels. And with respect to documents, note that it does have a scan document button that is activated immediately from the camera, which is a good thing. The photo is also automatically captured. Turn on the flash and apply some color optimization, and note that we are also going to have the ability to go adding pages as we go showing more content, and also from here we can select if we want automatic or manual capture and change the color style we want to apply on all these scanned documents. Once we are done, we can press the save button, so it's a pretty advanced scanner that works well. And it is also possible to scan QR codes directly from the main camera interface. So all the operation is correct. In the software, we are going to find iPad OS 18.1 as the operating system. And it is definitely a very mature operating system with respect to what the tablet offers us, however. Compared to the operating system of a computer, it could still have some shortcomings or limitations, especially in the catalog of applications. Although without a doubt within the tablets, Apple offers the best possible catalog. Because to give an example, it offers applications such as DaVinci, Resolve, Photoshop, Illustrator, Affinity Photo, Affinity Publisher. Affinity Designer and all these applications are much more professional use and are not available on Android. That's why I insist that in terms of tablets, if they offer you a catalog of very pro applications, although at the same time you will notice that there are applications that are below the functionalities that it offers you on the computer. So I think it will depend on you as a user. If you use basic functions of these applications, maybe the iPad version is enough. But if you use much more sophisticated and advanced functions, you will need a computer. In this case, Apple will offer a very good amount of updates, although they have not defined exactly the number, but they can easily get around 7 updates, so that is not something to worry about. In this version of the operating system, remember that we will find some functions to add more widgets that we have available throughout the entire screen. Previously that was not there, and of course has a very good variety of each of these widgets to achieve a good level of customization. Also, while we are on the subject, note that we can dye everything in a dark shade or dye it in a specific color. And note that if we are going to find a very good capacity of customization depending on what you like, you could even have the setting of larger icons hiding the labels, and it looks nice as well. In fact, for the lock screen, we are also going to find the same level of customization that we would find on the iPhone, for example. We can add new covers with different styles. It even brings some generators for solid color or for emojis as to achieve this kind of effects. And note that we are going to find also one that synchronizes the current weather status. And in this part, we can also enable some other widgets, so that directly from the lock screen, we can have a quick display of some specific data, and of course it has some other customization sections. So this is at the level of customization what you could achieve with iPad OS, which I think is fine, although it is not its main strength. The control center knows that we will show a good level of customization as happened on the iPhone. You can create your own controls, as it notes that it's divided into connectivity, playback, multimedia, and also the general controls or favorite controls, as it notes that in this section you can modify controls, add all kinds of controls, or even resize some of the controls that are already placed. Then, it is very practical to place all the buttons exactly the way you want them. At the bottom, we will find this application dock that, as you will notice at the time of entering, is going to hide. However, you can redisplay it by simply sliding from the bottom up slightly. Then you can quickly return to see the applications you have open, your favorite apps, or enter the full catalog of applications without leaving the current application. Then it offers you also a good mechanism to navigate through the system, and remember that if you hold down on any application, it could also show you additional tools like to access a specific section of the application. That will depend entirely on what application it is, but it also gives you that shortcut available, and obviously in addition to the traditional gesture navigation that we currently see on many devices. It also supports this type of gestures, like to return to the home screen simply. By putting the fingers of the hand together, we could also slide 4 fingers up to open the list of recent applications, or even with 4 fingers to switch between one and another application quite easily. Remember that we could also select some text, and with 3 fingers inward we can make the gesture of copying. Then with 3 fingers outward we can paste the content. So if it gives you gestures that are practical in real life. And another thing that can be very useful is the scheduled summary of notifications. So if you usually receive too many notifications during the day and prefer to avoid having so many notifications but do not want to miss important things, you could set this summary so that at a certain time of the day shows you in a much simpler way all the notifications you are receiving. Remember, that is also available the focus section, where you can customize, for example, that during 1 hour of work there are applications that you do have available, and also people that can contact you or interrupt you. Plus, you could even select the style of your screen so that visually you are more aware that it is time for work or it is time for entertainment or fun. So you can also add here some filters so that other applications are also available. Aware of which mode you have active, then it could also be more or less useful. And now let me tell you about the multitasking that you could get to achieve here on the iPad, because if you didn't know yet, note that there are apps that you can transform for a slide overview, which will be a floating view note, that the app goes to one side, but you need to open another app to notice how it works. Then we have an app in the background and another app floating on this one. Although note that in this case it does not allow us to resize this small window, but simply interact with it and then hide it again so that you can show it again with this small button then if it helps you somehow to have a kind of multitasking, but it is not 100% at the same time. In fact, we would also have the visual organizer, which is the one that is activated with this button. And note that then a different interface will be enabled where you can switch you between applications in a slightly simpler way, although there are still applications that keep the priority in full screen. But you can transform them into a floating screen in this way. And in case if it allows you to somehow resize the windows, although not to the exact size you want, but if somehow switches between a vertical and horizontal ratio, and as I said, you can go switching between these applications in this way. Note that in this case, for example, we have 2 applications in this work environment, so you're going to compel each one of them to switch, but I insist that it is a bit complicated to actually use 2 applications at the same time on this tablet. So in this sense, still the experience is perceived much simpler compared to computers, and also even compared to what Samsung offers through the DeX mode, which is more advanced. However, fortunately, it does have the split screen option, which if you have the option to use 2 applications at the same time on this tablet, then you could still add a third one. It allows you to have 2 applications open at the same time, and as I anticipated, thanks to the proportion that has the screen, I think you have a very good space to work with both applications. So with split screen, if you could have running 2 things at the same time, in fact you could still add a third in this floating mode, although I insist that does not allow you to place it where you want specifically, but note how we could also drag and drop certain contents. So I do like it, but as I say, at this price it is a bit complicated to prefer an operating system with these characteristics compared to a computer operating system. The Apple Pencil will also provide you with many options. For example, remember that you can squeeze the Apple Pencil Pro if you have this version, although it is also compatible with previous versions. But in this case, for example, could display a palette of tools or could switch between the tool you have and the eraser. Anyway, you can change quite a bit the behavior you want this pencil to have when you press on it. For example, in this case, I'm in the freeform application, which is from Apple for infinite mind maps. And notice that while I can start painting with the pencil, I can also press and notice that when I press the pencil, this menu of options will appear, so I can change some parameters of the stroke that I'm doing. And obviously the stylus has a very good latency response. It supports tilt as well. It even detects the twist that you do on the Apple Pencil. So with some brushes, watch how the stroke would change this way. And if the twist is now going to be a much thinner stroke, then it detects even the twist of your brush and other things. It's a very, very professional pencil. Although of course it has a separate cost, but if you're into drawing stuff or it serves you as the tool, you should know you're going to love it. It's too good. Then, in addition to this additional menu option, note that we will find an option to double tap on the pencil. although this gesture can become a little more tedious to activate. But it also allows you to select which tool you want to be activated. We will also find some visual effects, as the iPad can cast a shadow on it to give a much more natural feel, even though it doesn't. It's a natural shadow and some other things. You can also select the option to draw only with the Apple Pencil so that the finger does not influence everything you are doing on the screen. It also has the option to write completely by hand, so you can watch as it transforms all your scribbles into something digital. You also have options to delete words by simply crossing over them in a simple way, so the interaction is very natural. You could also select by drawing a line above the text you want, and you can also insert some space to be able to write more content or join two words. So the interaction for handwriting or for transforming your handwritten text to digital is also going to be very good. And it also adds gestures in the corners. For example, in the bottom left corner, we will have the possibility to take a screenshot to immediately write on it and from the corner. On the bottom right, we can open a quick note, which in this case will be the last one you had open, so the interaction with the Apple Pencil is definitely good. In addition to all the interaction that you could achieve in conjunction with other applications, note that there will also be the option to configure the trackpad and keyboard with all its behavior, so you can enjoy a very positive experience and very similar to what we would see on a computer. And in general, as you know, the operating system has a shortcut application that would allow you to try to do multiple actions with a single touch or automate some things, although I've already told you about it. I find the shortcuts too complex for a basic type of user. You need to understand quite a few things or follow several tutorials to take advantage of the 100% of this app. The new photo app is very nice and allows you to have everything well organized with filters and many categories. And as something curious, remember that the Notes application could also solve some mathematical operations. As you realize, it is quite smart, and even the result puts it as if you had written it by hand, and of course you can add new operations and it will be updated. Even remember that you could assign variables like x5s so that later you can type anything and it will give you the result. So also in all these kind of sections, it is very interesting. And if it is premiering calculator application that was noted before, which now, as you realize, also has the option of scientific calculator and also the mathematical notes, which is similar to what I showed you a moment ago to create variables and do sophisticated things by hand. So in the software, Apple finds one of its strengths. It offers you Faces, iMovie, Keynote, Numbers, Pages. All this is free software that will allow you to do relatively professional things. We will also find Logic Pro, Final Cut. In short, Apple's catalog of applications is very good. In addition to the compatibility with professional applications that I told you about a moment ago. With respect to artificial intelligence, there is bad news because although it is compatible with Apple Intelligence, at the moment it cannot be used in Spanish. You would need to configure the iPad in English and all the functions will be in English. So in artificial intelligence, it falls below its main competitor, which is the Galaxy Tab S Ultra that brings support for all Galaxy options. So there are definitely few options here to take advantage of being part of the Apple ecosystem. Obviously, that is a positive point because you have very good interaction between everyone. With AirDrop, you can send documents to yourself. With AirPlay, you can send content to play on other screens. You have also the application continuity feature so that in case you are viewing a page on your Mac, you can resume it on iPad, and the same with iPhone. You could also use the iPad or iPhone camera on other devices, control nearby devices, even use the iPad as a second monitor on your Mac. Although for optimal performance, there should not be so many computers with the same account around because we tried to test it and the computers we have here at the studio have the same account, and so it seems that it does not work very well. But for personal use, I think it can be useful. You also have Apple Home to control things in your home directly from the tablet. And in this case, Apple also offers you iCloud to have all your files synchronized. Although they give you 5 gigabytes for free and then you have to pay if you want more storage. So I insist that in ecosystem, I think Apple already proved that it is very good at this iPad to be part of that ecosystem. Ecosystem finds one of its strongest points there. Although, as against, we will find a very limited interaction with respect to other products from other brands. You know that Apple has this tendency that once you have an Apple product, you need the rest of Apple products to have the full experience. With regard to security, we will notice that it does not have a fingerprint reader, an important absence that we do see in other tablets, but in its favor, it has Face ID, which is this three-dimensional facial recognition that Apple offers you, and you can use it to unlock your iPad, or also to make payments or to automatically fill in passwords with the technology that it has through its password. Application. So it is a good implementation with several options. Although in Face ID you do not have this facility to register several people as if you would have it with the fingerprint reader. Also in this case, Apple does not allow you to create multiple user profiles as to also share the iPad with more family members. Nor does it have any special child mode that allows you to have some special restrictions directly on this iPad when you activate this special mode. So I think that in that sense, if it offers us a much more limited and short experience compared to what a computer offers us, or even compared to what offers us the Galaxy Tab S10 Ultra that would be its competitor. It's not in the same category, although at least it does have an option to block access to certain apps, to request Face ID or a special code. So in some ways that might help a little bit with lending the iPad to little ones, or also for privacy in case you've lent your unlocked iPad. There is also the option to hide applications, hide multimedia content, and also to find the device in case it is lost and remember that it will use the network. It's also a very useful feature for Apple devices, although in this case it's not trackable if it's turned off as it is with the iPhone. So it would be interesting to see this addition as well. Let's now talk about the battery, which has a capacity of 38.99 watts-hour. It is curious that in this case they have not expressed the capacity in terms of milliamp hours, so they express it as if it were a computer battery, and in that case it is quite a large battery. To test how well it could perform, we ran continuous benchmarks, and in this case it achieved 4 hours and 22 minutes. In this type of fairly heavy testing, with the brightness at maximum and even the flashlight on, it was obviously a test trying to discharge the battery as fast as we could, so for everyday use without any problems. It's going to withstand a whole day at school or work, so in battery life there is nothing to complain about. It's pretty good. But where I can complain is the charging speed. Included in the box is a 20% watt charger. The charger is obviously compact, which helps to transport it more comfortably, but in my test, in 15 minutes it barely got up to 7% battery. That's an exaggeratedly slow charge. In 30 minutes it got to 16%, so the full charge was completed in 3 hours and 27 minutes. That's an exaggerated time, and in fact I don't think I would mind if the charging time from 0 to 100 was extended, if at least the first half hour it charged very fast. But even in this first stage we didn't find fast charging. So this is definitely what bothered me the most. Also, it doesn't have smart charging, which could help us to leave it charging all night and not worry so much about the deterioration in the battery. So it only has the 80% charge lock, which I think is something that you're going to have to leave on to leave the iPad charging all night without worrying about the battery deterioration. So it only has the 80% charge lock, which I think is something that you're going to have to leave on to leave the iPad charging all night without worrying about the battery deterioration that degrades too much. In fact, through the software, it also shows you the number of charge cycles it has had, so you can see the deterioration of the battery and also the maximum capacity in a percentage. So if you are going to sell it later, or if you are going to buy it used, you can check how healthy the battery is. However, because it doesn't have smart charging, you could end up with further deterioration if you leave the iPad plugged into the power supply for a long time after it's been used. I already reached 100 by 5th, so it is clear to me that charging is one of the weak points of the iPad, although apparently it supports 35 watts charging at most. But you have to buy some other charging adapter to have this range. So clearly, this is a weak point. Let's talk about the performance of this device, and I will also tell you some of its features. In this case, it comes with Apple's M4 chip, an extremely powerful processor. Note that I'm browsing through a number of tabs in Safari, and all the sharing is pretty quick and very fast. We don't see it freezing at any point. Although it should be noted that for the 256 or 512 gigabytes of storage versions, we see a slightly lower processor and power because it has 9 cores. Whereas for the 1 or 2 terabytes of storage edition, we find a 10-core CPU. Fortunately, the GPU is the same in both cases with 10 cores, compatible with ray tracing. But if we will see difference in the RAM memory, as in this case, the 256 or 512 versions come with 8 GB of RAM, which could fall a bit short if you want to open a lot of things at the same time, and the edition with 1 or 2 terabytes of storage goes up to 16 GB of RAM. Note that in Safari the experience was completely good. We do not see that they have any difficulty. We are going to open now other applications just for you to see more or less how it performs, and I think that in this type of simple application we shouldn't see any kind of lag or anything like that, since it's a processor that has power to spare, so these kinds of basic tasks don't really put it to the test at any point. And note again how switching back and forth between all of this doesn't slow it down at any point, but the RAM might fall a little short if you're going to be doing complex work. For example, with video editing that requires a lot of tracks or something similar. So even though the chip is very powerful, the RAM memory might limit the capabilities of this device a little bit. But let me close all the applications to do our basic test, which will be to export some videos recorded with this iPad in 4K with a total duration of 1 min. So let's see how long it takes. In this case, it seems that this editor is not so optimized for tablet experience. Still, let's wait. And that's it. It took 17 seconds. In this sense, it seems that it is not the fastest we have seen, at least using this editor, so let's give it another try, now using DaVinci Resolve, just to see what it could cause. So it's already started and we're going to go back. It's exactly the same test with 4 combined clips recorded with this device in 4K, with a total duration of 1 min. And well, it took 1 minute and 5 seconds. It seems to me an excessive time. It seems that DaVinci Resolve is much slower. So overall, I think that although it has very good compatibility with advanced video editing software in terms of power, it falls short and does not appeal to me as a tool for video editing. But let's talk about games now. Remember that in this case, when you open a game, it automatically enables game mode, which doesn't do much more than direct all resources to the game and maybe avoid unwanted interruptions, but it doesn't add you some other options to software like a stare or a frame counter that we see on some other devices. So the experience, I think, is not as complete in terms of software add-ons. However, in terms of compatibility, it does appeal. Notice that in Call of Duty by default, it gives the graphics quality very high at a high rate. However, we can also go up to the quality. We can run the game at maximum graphics at the same time with the maximum frame rate. Or we can go up to the ultra rate while still maintaining a high level of graphics quality. So in that sense, the compatibility looks very good, and obviously it has very good support for additional graphics effects, so it has no problems in that sense. First, let's give priority to the graphic quality, and it must be said that the graphics look very detailed. It even looks with a more advanced resolution than what usually we have seen on other devices. So graphically speaking, the experience is very positive, and we will also see very good stability. In this case, we were playing with a gamepad, and the experience, I insist, is very good. In fact, the temperature control shows us that this game is relatively dry for all the power that this processor has, as it reached up to 32.4 degrees Celsius, so it did not have even a little bit of heating. Then we gave priority to the refresh rate, and note how it was able to reach 120 frames per second. In fact, this is the first device we see that supports ultra rate and very high quality at the same time. As usually when you want to use the ultra rate, the graphic quality drops completely, but in this case keeps both at a high level, so you can play perfectly well in a very comfortable way. And again, it is quite impressive to see this level of graphic quality in a device with these characteristics. The temperature in this case, if it came to rise a little higher to 37.4 degrees Celsius. But as you see, the experience was very good. Then we played SpongeBob. By default, we see that the resolution and quality is high, but for a test adjusted to the price that has this device, we raised everything to the maximum epic at 60 frames per second and with the smoothing activated, and we must say that it does not have the 100% stability, but it will show a high performance. That is, it has fluctuations, but they are not perceived in reality. So the gaming experience is really very good, and again with a good temperature control. Then we played Kark Street, which is one of the most complicated games we have tested, and note that we turned everything up to the maximum possible. By default, several things were in a medium level. But of course, for the price, we put everything to the maximum, and it is a game. We have found this to be a problem for many devices. We also raise the frames per second and activate the smoothing of the edges, And in this case, you are going to notice that the low peaks if perceived. Although fortunately, it is not completely frozen. But if it can become something slightly annoying for the most demanding. However, we must remember that we activate the graphics at the maximum possible, and that it is one of the most complicated games we have tested. In fact, if you record the screen while you are playing the game, you're going to notice that these frame drops can become a little more visible and annoying. So this confirms to us that it is a very complex game, that even this device with all the power it has certain problems in running, but it is the best we have seen recently when testing various processors in this game. Because even recording the screen with all this high level, we see that shows good gameplay and very good graphics. Next we played War Thunder. Note that we chose the highest possible graphics quality at 120 frames per second. And since this processor supports ray tracing, we also enabled it. Although it should be noted that when ray tracing is enabled, the resolution is lowered to the lowest, which is curious, but later we can bring it back up if we wish. So, the graphics in this game are relatively complex, and again we see a warming very similar to the previous game, and again we see that fluctuates in the frames per second, but it does not come to perceive, but mostly because the game is not too much action, but compared to what we have seen on other devices. Definitely that proves us that this iPad has very good power. Finally, we also played Bright Memory, which is one of the most complicated games we've seen recently, and boy did it cost. We realized that it cost due to the level of heating that came. As far as I can tell, even though it's a tablet, it's a considerably high temperature, although the game runs relatively smoothly. Unfortunately, we could not specifically monitor the performance in this game, but we can tell you that it runs at over 60 frames per second without problems, although we will find some stumbles at times. So it is not a 100% fluid experience, and if your record screen could have a little more complication, but overall it was a good experience. Gaming experience. Simply that if it got to warm up much more than we would like, considering that it is a tablet. In conclusion, the iPad Pro seems to me a very high quality device. As a piece of hardware is great, the software competing against other tablets is spectacular for the support it has with complex applications. But the price has to compete with laptops, and in this sense the iPad experience still seems very limited. Although of course, if you take advantage of the Apple Pencil and generally use all Apple products, you'll really appreciate having a touchscreen this big. But that's because Apple won't decide to release a touchscreen MacBook. For now, I would not recommend too much to buy an iPad Pro for the high cost it has, as I think you can perfectly well have the same K-Pack with a cheaper iPad, accessing the same catalog of applications. Maybe with a little less of power, but I think that in practical life it is not necessary to have so much power in a device with these features. But let me know your opinion in the comments. For the moment, we have reached the end of this video. If you liked it, you'll know you can indicate it, and see you next time.